Hey again, and welcome to GamEntropy, where we ask the question of what makes a game tick. So, confession time. Ask me about who my favorite game designers are, and I guarantee that Suda51's name will come up.
Suda's work is unilaterally interesting. This isn't to say everything he's done, or does now, is necessarily good, as many of his noted pieces are either abstract to approach, or at the very least limited in scope with only so much replay value to their name. In fact, I'd say most of his work is B-grade by design, but much of what he's done or been involved with is far from hollow, and is a testament to the fact that something doesn't necessarily have to bear top-dollar production values in order to have some intrinsic quality or lasting value. This brings us to Suda51's most recent title, Lollipop Chainsaw. Purely as a game, if you've already played some of Suda's past works, like No More Heroes, then you probably have a loose idea what to expect.
However, Suda's games are not interesting merely because of how they're designed, but what he puts in them, and Lollipop Chainsaw in particular feels like a well-placed knife, plunged into today's gaming culture.
Whereas most action games star characters like badass hunters, raging barbarians, or even hyper-violent otakus, Lollipop Chainsaw stars Juliet Starling, a perky blonde American cheerleader whose family happens to be a clan of zombie hunters. The basic idea is very reminiscent of the original Buffy the Vampire Slayer film, with Juliet combining cheerleader moves with undead slaying technique. Of course, the film, bastardized though it was, showed Buffy growing beyond her cheerleading lifestyle and developing into a person who realized many of her pursuits were ultimately shallow. Juliet makes no profound conclusions about herself, but what makes her unusual, especially as video game protagonists go, is that she's surprisingly well-adjusted. The Starling family is complete and intact, with a loving stay-at-home mother, a tough but affectionate father, a cool and collected older sister, and a spastic menace-behind-the-wheel younger sister. To top it all off, she even has a jock boyfriend who is demonstrated to be a fairly warm and considerate person, at times to the extreme.
I'm screwing up your birthday, aren't I? I'm sorry, Juliet. I don't want to fuck up your birthday.
While Juliet is still shown having some basic fears about wanting to protect her family and loved ones, she's primarily meant to function as a cheerful all-American girl, without the kind of seriousness or dysfunction that we usually see in our protagonists today. Juliet, however, does have the sort of training and skill in dispatching the undead that one doesn't particularly look for in the all-American girl. This serves two purposes in Lollipop Chainsaw, as it both provides a plausible reason why Juliet herself survives when her classmates are torn apart left and right, as well as to assure us that she is familiar with incidents like one in the game, which allows the story to maintain a degree of levity. The game deliberately takes this to extremes, showing our protagonists with an unusual degree of comfort amidst the carnage surrounding them.
I hate it when everyone turns into zombies, but it's also kind of fun because I get to do stuff like jump on a fire truck.
Haha! It is fun! It makes me forget that most of my friends are dead!
Whereas many games either ignore or glorify human suffering and death, Lollipop Chainsaw acknowledges it exists, accepts it as horrible, and then proceeds to make a joke about it.
This sort of treatment of violence and death is abrasive and pretty tasteless, but it's one of the few games that avoids drowning the subject matter in a sea of blood and machismo.
Lollipop Chainsaw doesn't hide its graphic violence, but rather it very consciously distracts from it. While titles like the recent Max Payne 3 seem to revel in the sort of graphic action that greatly exceeds the needs of the story, Lollipop's mixture of carnage and rainbows come off like a display of bizarre censorship gone deliberately awry. Excessive violence, as demonstrated, can produce some pretty far-fetched results. But so can excessive censorship, as Lollipop Chainsaw seems intent to show us. We're still privy to what's going on, but making something more or less than what it is in both cases can come off as simply ridiculous.
That said, one of the most prominent features of Lollipop Chainsaw is its cast, both the heroes and the villains, and the roles they play as a commentary on the gaming culture of today.
First, just ask how often we see the hottest girl in school, a cheerleader on top of everything else, portrayed as the hero of an action game. Back when games were ingrained in our subculture rather than our mainstream, the image of the nerd was tied into how the medium was viewed and was considered the core market. Lollipop Chainsaw makes it clear how much has changed, with the cheerleader taking out the shambling corpses of fallen nerds. Not out of malice, but because she has taken her place as an acceptable protagonist. This is a game where the cheerleader and her jock boyfriend are the heroes who save the day, while the villains can be fit into cliques that are either outmoded or simply outside the spectrum of conventional acceptance. Topping this all off is the villain, a ridiculed goth kid who is responsible for the whole zombie apocalypse, whose actions and motivations are reminiscent of a school shooting with a supernatural bent. With heroes and villains who seem to fall on two separate sides of popularity, it makes a degree of sense that Lollipop Chainsaw's monsters would then be zombies, a menace that has rapidly become the most overused subgenre in gaming today. The undead talk just enough to have a collective character, but not enough to bring anything of substance. They spout off nonsensical one-liners, and it's hard to tell if they're meant to relate to whatever the person was thinking before they died, or if they're just random thoughts passing through a rotting brain.
Lollipop's atmosphere states that there's an underbelly to this wholesome Americana we've been raised to idealize the USA with. While the game features enough modern trappings and references, much of its atmosphere feels trapped between the 50s and the 90s, as if to say there's something wrong with even the most wholesome-looking things.
Killing a specific zombie will unlock a mini bio for it, often revealing dirty secrets or nasty habits that the person had while they were still alive. At the same time, we have Juliet's mother, who is staying at home and making the protagonist's birthday cake, blindingly unaware of the chaos ripping the town outside her home apart.
Oh, wait. I really am a dingbat. It's sitting right here on the counter.
The game itself concedes that she's ignorant of her husband and daughter's zombie-slaying activities, even as Juliet herself admits killing her first zombie at 6 months old.
I killed my first zombie at 6 months old with a sharpened rattle.
Telling us the woman is either incredibly unobservant or deliberately fooling herself. Even Juliet herself satisfies this philosophy, embarrassed to tell her boyfriend about her zombie-slaying upbringing for fear of rejection. She's not ashamed of what she does, but rather that she'll be misunderstood for it. Likewise, the otherwise clean-cut Nick has a few things that he's not willing to let Juliet in on about himself.
I think I just stepped in cow poop.
I know. It's like a German porn video around here.
What is that?
Nothing.
You don't watch...
We should all be suitably embarrassed for him.
So, as much as Lollipop Chainsaw serves to make a statement about games and the gaming audience of today, it's also possibly quite under-evolved in how it treats its women, particularly Juliet.
The protagonist of Lollipop Chainsaw is definitely sexualized, and there's very little of her the game won't show you when given the chance.
But should we go so far as to call the title misogynistic through its portrayal of the main character? On one hand, yes. On the other hand, maybe.
As the pretty popular girl in school, Juliet isn't exactly shown to be the sharpest tack in the box.
Cool, I'm great at basketball. Let's put the round thing in the goalpost, Nick.
She's certainly no Buffy. Hell, she isn't even this Buffy. And to top it all off, some pretty degrading insults and comments are hurled her way. Sometimes literally.
Vanilla slut!
Now, considering the nature of the enemy in question, and even his role in relation to Juliet's in the story, what he does and says shouldn't itself be a detriment to her character. At the same time, though, Juliet is objectified even by the people she saves. And what's troubling is, owing to the structure of the game, we're not really sure what her character's viewpoints would be of the people whose lives she's trying to save. It isn't helped by the fact that, lean and in shape as she clearly is, she still doesn't have an ideal self-image, and often comments about her insecurities even though her basic workout routine would probably kill any of us.
Just being ironic because of my ginormous ass. Ugh.
Part of what's disconcerting about this is the frequency that she says it. Maybe it's just meant to be a joke, and while it's unusual to have a protagonist who has a slight self-image problem, it's frustrating that the game does nothing with the idea but use it for chuckles.
Does my butt look less ginormous when I'm all pink like this?
Your butt never looks ginormous, Juliet.
However, she is placed in a position of empowerment, having the skill and experience to defend herself without breaking a sweat. Her boyfriend, meanwhile, is about as emasculated as one can get, and while he isn't objectified the way she is, he's the one placed at the mercy of his circumstances and helpless to defend himself. Juliet is endeared with him, yet he is such a non-entity in light of the game's circumstances that his treatment sometimes teeters between that of a pet.
You're like a kitten that doesn't speak Japanese.
Yeah, okay.
And a fashion accessory.
Nick, it would be really cool if I could implant an MP3 player in your forehead. A boyfriend and an iPod all in one. More room in my purse.
You realize that's completely degrading, right?
The game even makes a point to acknowledge this when he becomes discontent with the situation late in the plot. And it becomes pretty clear that despite Juliet's high school vocation, it's Nick that is, in fact, the cheerleader.
Moral support, Nick. You could do some cheers.
Rah, rah, it sucks being ahead. Fuck everything. Rah, rah, how's that?
So, the message is mixed. Juliet's not exactly the poster child for female empowerment, and while the ethos of Lollipop Chainsaw is somewhat slurred, the protagonist remains a positive figure in an era where we seem to be moving towards moody anti-heroes.
Like you. You. And you. And I'm looking at you too. Lollipop Chainsaw does encapsulate what I admire about Suda51, in that his games always seem to be about something. The gameplay isn't necessarily groundbreaking, but it's the content the experience as a whole is made up of that make his titles memorable. I don't know if every one of the themes was what the designers, be they Suda himself, or writer James Gunn, or someone else, intended. But the title does stand apart from many other titles on the shelf today, and deserves acknowledgement, if only for that.
Given the frequency of Suda's games in getting sequels, we'll probably not see another Lollipop Chainsaw, which is, in a way, good, if only because it ensures that it will remain unique. But if we do...
Oh my god! What the heck happened? Gross! Back off! OMFG!
Maybe something other than zombies, because that's really getting overplayed these days.